For as long as Yu-Gi-Oh's been around, the anime has also shared the spotlight and has gotten a lot of people into the game. But not all the cards from the anime are in the actual game. There are anime exclusive cards which tend to be some of the craziest and most absurd monsters in existence. So in today's episode of the Unknown Side of Yu-Gi-Oh, we're going to be going over some of the original anime exclusive monsters. Starting today's episode is not just one monster, but one of the many anime exclusive archetypes called the Armor Monsters. These monsters are a series of level 3 to 6 Earth monsters that function similar to equip cards, but rather than equipping to monsters, they equip to the duelists, so that duelists can fight hand to hand with monsters and even beat up other duelists. Used mainly by Valen in the Orichalcos arc, we only really get to see the armor cards with this one duelist. But despite the niche appearances of the armor cards in the anime, they are an entirely different class of monsters that are appropriately named armor type monsters, like tuners or tunes. All armor monsters have two archetypal effects. The first is that only one armor monster can attack per turn, and if there are two or more armor monsters in the field and one is an attack target, then whoever controls armor monster can change the attack target. And rather than go through each of the specific armor pieces, I'll just stick to some interesting entries. The most iconic card of the bunch is Active Guard. This is a level 4 Earth Machine armor type monster with 0 attack and 2500 defense. Active Guard has the archetypal effect of the armor cards on top of its own effect, which is that you take no damage this turn or while it's equipped. This acts like the centerpiece of the armor items, as manipulating the attack targets makes certain armor pieces swap in and out while taking no damage. For example, Big Bang Blow. This card has the same level, attribute, and type as Active Armor, and has the effect that if it's destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, while you control 2 or more monsters, you inflict damage to your opponent equal to the total attack of the monsters on your opponent's side of the field. Another interesting card of the armor archetype is Double Cloth Armor, which has the highest level of the armor cards at level 6, but still shares the attribute and type of the other monsters. Double Cloth Armor is essentially the evolution of Active Guard, as it shares a similar but upgraded effect. Double Cloth Armor can't attack, and if it is attacked, you inflict damage to your opponent equal to half of the monster's attack, and you destroy both monsters with no battle damage calculation. On the more trap side of the armor is Trap Buster, which shares this spot as the lowest level monster in the archetype and has 0 attack and defense stat line. But the payoff is a strong effect, which negates the effects of any and all traps that target one armor monster that you control, or that would destroy 2 or more monsters in the field on top of the archetypal effect. So essentially, Trap Buster offers some of the best all-around protection for the archetype, as it negates trap cards that would destroy any of your armor monsters. It's just a shame that the trap cards don't really see much use anymore. Next up is Buster Pile, which is one of the best offensive tools the armor archetype has. Buster Pile is level 4 with no attack or defense, but has the effect that it can't be destroyed by battle, you take no battle damage involving Buster Pile, and if it attacks an opponent's monster, you can destroy that monster after damage calculation and inflict an extra 500 damage to your opponent on top of the archetypal effects. This is definitely one of the stronger and more broken armor cards, as it synergizes insanely well with Trap Buster to essentially have protection against 2/3 of the cards in the game. The final card in the armor archetype that I want to bring up is Psychic Armor Head, which is a piece that binds the entire archetype together. Essentially, rather than drawing normally, you can just add one armor card to your hand from your deck. And if for one reason or another, Psychic Armor Head is in your graveyard, you can special summon to your field, which essentially means you get to re-equip it. The armor cards are insanely strong in both older Yu-Gi-Oh! And even nowadays to an extent. However, despite how strong the armor cards are, they lost to Joey Wheeler, and the loss resulted in Valen losing his soul. Essentially, when Joey is on his final legs with 100 life points left, he activates Grave Robber, which lets you steal one card from your opponent's graveyard, which we'll talk about later. With Grave Robber, Joey steals Big Bang Blow from Valen's graveyard, which is a level 4 armor monster with no stats, but has the archetypal effects of the armor monsters, and when it's destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you inflict damage to each player equal to the total attack of each monster they control, and then destroy all monsters on the field. So with Big Bang Blow equipped, Joey then activates Take One Chance, which is another anime card that is one of the most plot armory cards in the anime, because its effect allows you to select one random card into graveyard and activate it immediately. And the card it activates is conveniently the Claw of Hermos, which is a little different than the current version of the card. The anime version, once activated, sends itself and one monster you control to the graveyard to activate an equipped spell card that is a fused version of the Claw of Hermos and the sent monster. So essentially, Joey becomes Konami and makes a whole new card with the anime effect of Claw of Hermos. This result is the creation of Big Bang Dragon Blow, which is an equipped spell that has the effect that during either player's turn, you contribute one dragon-type monster to destroy all monsters your opponent controls. Then you can inflict damage to your opponent equal to the combined attack of those monsters. And conveniently, Joey had his famous Red Eyes Black Dragon, while Valen had his full set of Orichalcos empowered armor, which then causes him to lose the duel and subsequently his soul. And unfortunately, or fortunately depending on who you ask, that is the last we see of the armor cards. But despite their really interesting effects and how they were used in Yu-Gi-Oh!, it's good that Konami never made a non-anime version. Because in reality, and this is going to go with the majority of the cards in today's episode, it would be a little bit too broken for the card game. The next card on our list is Grave Robber, which in the anime is a trap card that has the effect to steal one card from your opponent's graveyard. Despite how simple the anime effect of Grave Robber is, thankfully this card isn't in the real game of Yu-Gi-Oh!, because the wording of the anime effect is a lot more than just using a card from your opponent's graveyard. The card has the term steal, which implies just taking one of your opponent's cards and adding it to your deck, and you get to keep it forever. Although realistically, you just go back to your opponent's graveyard instead of yours, like most stealing effects in the base game. Grave Robber was integral in the anime as it was one of the best plot tools in the show, conveniently letting Joey or other duelists turn the tides, like with the armor cards that I just mentioned. Thankfully, when Konami created the trading card version of Grave Robber, it became somewhat more balanced. In the TCG, Grave Robber is still a trap card, but has the effect to select one spell card from your opponent's graveyard, and you can use it as your hand until the end of the turn. Then, if you use a said spell card, you take 2,000 points of damage. This version is a lot more balanced for using one of your opponent's cards, like with the limitations with regards to Grave Robber selecting only spell cards, and the 2,000 points of damage that comes with using the card. So in terms of usage, Grave Robber doesn't see much play because of this. However, there is some interesting rulings regarding Grave Robber because of its relatively unique effect. You can technically avoid the 2,000 life point drawback if you don't activate the card. So if you set the card and send to the graveyard by card effect, or to discard it as cost, so if you have something like Perform Bout Popper Upper or Magical Stone Excavation, it could find some use. But because you're using your opponent's cards, chances are you won't be able to actually use the card you steal anyway. So unless it's a tier 0 format where almost everyone is using the same deck, a Sword Soul player won't be needing full to respell cards. But it's good that this version of Grave Robber exists, because at that point it becomes a variant of Monster Reborn with a lot of utility. But again, because each deck is so unique, it wouldn't be that bad if the anime version of the Grave Robber came into modern play, but maybe with just different wording choices. The next card on the list is Duke of Demise, which is a level 6 Dark Fiend monster with 2,000 attack and 1,700 defense. The Duke also has the effect that it can't be destroyed by battle, and has a maintenance cost of 500 life points that you must pay during each of your standby phases. Now, the Duke of Demise's stats are pretty low by today's standards in Yu-Gi-Oh! But for older Yu-Gi-Oh! It was relatively standard for level 5 or higher monsters to have around 2,000 attack or more and just be beat sticks. And the fact that the Duke can't be destroyed by battle makes him a unique beat stick, because usually monsters who can't be destroyed have low attack. But why Duke of Demise is on this episode is because it's actually a fusion card, despite it being shown as a normal effect monster. The Duke of Demise required the Earl of Demise and Headless Knight to be fused with polymerization, so it's just a fun little blunder that the animation team made. Ashingray is a level 3 wing beast monster with pretty low stats, but equal stats of 500 attack and defense, with the flip effect to make your opponent discard one card from their hand. And when Ashingray is destroyed by battle, you can special summon another Ashingray from your hand or deck in face down defense position. Ashingray has a pretty unique effect to say the least. Unlike modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Where there are tons of cards that just blow up you or your opponent's field before the battle phase, most destruction was battle related in old Yu-Gi-Oh! On top of the significantly slower speed of the game, flip effect monsters had their usage. Ashingray would have been an insanely popular card because not only do you get to force your opponent to discard a card, which was a lot weaker back in the day, but also you get to special summon another copy of the card directly from your deck. And if your opponent only had one monster swing into Ashingray, you could perfectly set up for your next turn. And when it passes back to you, you can flip Ashingray and then have a free body to tribute for a high level monster. Or you can just leave Ashingray for the next turn and play defensively. But alas, like the other cards on this list, Ashingray is an anime exclusive card, but would have definitely seen play in older Yu-Gi-Oh! As the effect would have been bonkers in early formats. However, nowadays the story might not be the same. With how beneficial some cards and entire archetypes are for being in the graveyard, Ashingray seems more like a benefit to your opponent rather than yourself, even if discarding from your opponent's hand is still technically a very good effect. To finish off this episode, let's talk about the Orichalcos monsters. Mainly the ones used by the villain of the Waking the Dragon story arc in the original anime. Now, we've talked about how broken his boss monster was in a previous episode, but Darts has some other tricks up his sleeve that don't even exist in the TCG. The first of the Orichalcos monsters is Orichalcos Gigas. This level 4 monster has a measly 400 attack and 1500 defense, but with a strong effect to compensate. When it's destroyed, you can immediately special summon Gigas once more, but as a cost, it can't attack for the rest of the turn, and you skip your own draw phase. The payoff, however, is that Orichalcos Gigas gains 500 attack points for each time it was special summoned during the duel. So at the cost of losing your draw phase, which works great for Darts' illegal 16 card deck, you have a card that keeps coming back unless it's banished, and it can pretty easily beat over any monster after reboarding a couple of times. The only sure way to get rid of Gigas was to banish it, which very few cards were able to do in the olden days. But what's ironic is that when it was used in the finale in tandem with Orichalcos Kyutora, which is another anime exclusive Orichalcos card that essentially nullifies all battle damage, and when it's destroyed you can special summon an Orichalcos Shunoros from your deck. So there's an infinite loop with Gigas and Kyutora, where Darts could pretty easily have the Yu-Gi-Oh's largest beat stick by constantly resurrecting Gigas with its effect. But instead, Darts just tributes it to destroy one of Yu-Gi's monsters. But it kept the duel for the fate of the world going because plot, and nobody likes a short duel. But when Yugi and Kaiba think they are safe by having Gigas and Kyutora destroyed, and they think they've won, another boss monster arrives. This time it's Orichalcos Shunoros. Although there is a real counterpart in the TCG, it doesn't even come close to the anime version. On its own right, the anime version is its own boss monster entirely, but it's only the middleman before the Divine Serpent. The TCG version of Orichalcos Shunoros is a level 10 machine monster with question mark attack and 0 defense, which has the effect where it can only be special summoned if a normal monster is destroyed by battle. You can then special summon Shunoros and it gains 1000 attack points for each monster your opponent controls, and while it's face up on the field, level 4 normal monsters can't be destroyed by card effects. So suffice to say, Shunoros is pretty lackluster. But let's switch to its much stronger form, the anime version. This version of Shunoros has the effect that it can only be special summoned with the destruction of Orichalcos Kyutora. Once summoned, it gains attack points equal to the damage that was mitigated by Kyutora. Additionally, when Shunoros is summoned, you can special summon both one copy of Orichalcos Aristeros and Orichalcos Dexia from your hand or deck. And we'll get to those cards in just one second, because Shunoros has more. After damage calculation, if Shunoros attacks another monster, it loses attack points equal to its attack or its defense depending on its battle position. The last effect of Shunoros is that if destroyed while it has 0 attack, you can discard your hand and pay a casual 10,000 life points to special summon one Divine Serpent Gea from your deck. Although the destruction with 0 attack effect seems weird, there's a good reason for that which we'll go over to in a second. And remember, this is the version of Divine Serpent Gea that easily gets infinite attack points, and you can't lose the duel while you have Gea on the field. But again, we're sticking to Shunoros. And as previously mentioned, when it's summoned, Shunoros summons 2 other anime-exclusive cards, Orichalcos Aristeros and Orichalcos Dexia. These 2 are the sword and shield of Shunoros. Starting with Dexia, the sword, which is a level 4 monster and has the effect that when it battles an opponent's monster, the attack of Dexia becomes either equal to the attack position monster's attack or the defense position monster's defense points plus 300 until the end of the damage step. And after damage calculation, one Orichalcos Shunoros you control loses attack equal to the attack this card had during the damage step, which falls into the effect of Shunoros needing to be destroyed at 0 attack points. Additionally, it can't be destroyed while you control Shunoros, which makes it quite the good shield. On the other hand, literally is Orichalcos Aristeros, which serves as its shield. It has the same destruction immunity, but when an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can change the attack target to Aristeros and gain defense equal to the attacking monster plus 300. And after damage calculation, Shunoros also loses the attack points equal to the amount of defense gained. So suffice to say, Shunoros is quite the boss monster. But in the anime, it was more of a stalling monster than anything. Because despite how strong the offensive capabilities of anime Shunoros is, he is on a timer with the attack point diminishing effects of Dexia and Aristeros. But that works to the benefit of the Orichalcos because bringing out Gea is the end goal. And in the anime, Shunoros isn't destroyed by some insane strategy, but with a simple activation of Mirror Force from the graveyard through the effect of legendary Knight Critias. Which is pretty underwhelming, but the destruction allowed Shunoros' attack to drop to 0, which let Dart summon the big bad of the series, Divine Serpent Gea, for the finale of the story arc, which is all we could ask for. And before we end off this video, did you know in Magic, the different colors of cards really dictate what kinds of effects they have? For example, only blue cards really have the ability to counter other cards. That would be like if only one archetype of deck had the ability to use hand traps. However, it's a really big archetype which can be splashed in with other colors in various different ways, all of which you can learn if you watch the video on how the Magic color pie works, which will be linked at the end of the video right now.